People who had no sex education at all and had never ever seen the opposite sex's special parts. How'd you know how sex worked, if you did at all, and which parts were supposed to go where? How did your first time go? Never received any sex ed when I was younger. While watching PRN I always thought, why doesn't his sklong have the extra bit of skin mine does? Time goes on and my first GF is coming over to mine for the first time when my parents aren't home. This is it. Time to lose the V plates. But wait. This extra bit of skin on my cum gun hasn't fallen off yet. So, in a panic, I decide to get the scissors and just snip off this excess skin. Had them primed and ready to slice my banjo string when I get to knock at the door. My GF had inadvertently saved me from savagely mutilating my own genitals. When I was a kid, I thought sex was being under the bedsheets naked and make the bed rock while making noises. I cannot process how that made any sense to me then, but I just accepted that. I had only seen sex on TV. Haha, same. But I had little brothers, so I knew what a penis looks like. Except not when it's on a fully grown man. So I thought that a penis was always very small and soft. And that it mushed up against the outside of the vagina. I never dreamt it actually went in. Until I accidentally saw PRN on a public computer at an internet cafe from a previous user. Edit. For those of you wanting to know why I saw my little brother's penises. Haven't you had to change a sibling's diaper before? I remember learning from PRN that the testicles do not actually go in the vagina. It's a good thing you didn't watch Nuts and Ass. A slightly unrelated story about my friend. I was a year older than her. And told her everything because I had discovered it. At 13. She was stunned. And in complete denial. And was about to go and tell my mom that I told her about sex. She kept saying, this is disgusting. My parents could never do that. You're lying. I'm going to throw up. She was literally shaking. And took hours of convincing to get her to not tell my mom. My buddy told me all about it. The school or my father never mentioned it besides telling me not to have sex with my girlfriend years later. Farm kids learned by example unless exceptionally dense. I remember my little sister asking why the bull kept trying to jump over the cows. Farm guy here. My boys knew all about sex and reproduction by age 6. It's unavoidable. Critters gonna critter when and wherever they want. I didn't know that I had to be wet. It was a bit awkward when I first decided to do it, but we took it nice and slow and he was very understanding until the right day came. Edit. I thought when two people decide to have sex, they do it. So when I said, let's try again, he thought I meant that I was already wet and we tried it. The right day was that both of us were in the mood and ready to go. I am in my 20s, so we had to take it slow on all the first attempts. I grew up super duper religious. My mom didn't even really explain what my period was. I went to school and they provided information like sex ed and period education. But I never really got it. From the diagrams. I never figured a penis would get hard. So for years I honestly thought that both people would lie on their backs and kinda jingle their genitals together yoga style. But then I was like 14 and I found out that a penis can go from soft to hard. Like what the? Is it a solid or a liquid? Turns out if you do it right. We learned in biology how reproductive organs work, but they didn't mention sex. They just spoke about each individually. I grew thinking all humans had penises. Like I was even shown a vagina one time and I thought they had tucked it in SMH. Edit. Didn't receive any proper sex ed classes at school or any talks from my parents. I just accidentally stumbled upon PRN when I was really young. Like in middle school, elementary school, and as I got older. I did research on the female vagina. Mainly just studied the diagrams and learned how everything worked. So you can say I self-taught myself. My first time was still pretty bad. But it could have been much worse. When I was 16, I was lucky enough to have a girlfriend as inexperienced as I was. All we knew was that we wanted to do naked SI stuff together. It took a few nights, but we figured it out. As a parent, I had to explain to my then 6 and 8-year-old that no, sex isn't when a boy sticks his penis in a girl's butthole. I had a friend who told them that's what sex was, and I just imagined the poor children who never learn any different going into sex for the first time thinking it goes in the booty. We will explain it all in more detail at some point when they are a little older, but I just think they needed to know they weren't getting accurate information. I was homeschooled, raised with cattle, and fairly conservative Mormon parents who did not acknowledge sex. Having participated in several artificial insemination procedures by the age of 10, I thought for the longest time that pregnancy happened when an illiterate cowboy brought a teeny baby cow and shoved it up the ass of a mama cow. Or when one got married you requested a baby and a cowboy would show up at your door to shove it on up there. Luckily, we got the internet in 1998. And I finally learned that a woman got pregnant when a man with a mustache came on her face. Edit. Whoa. Thanks for the awards all. Now my parents will accept me. Serious reply. I figured it out while shopping for hose connectors at Lowe's with dad when I was maybe 10. I knew little more than boys have a penis. Girls have a vagina a la kindergarten cop. Male and female pieces. The male end goes into the female end. My inner voice goes, why do they call them male and female? Oh. That makes sense. An interesting story from history. Marie Antoinette and Louise V had a notoriously difficult time conceiving a child. They were married for years before it happened, even though both were seemingly fertile. There are a variety of theories as to why, but one is that they just didn't know what to do. As the story goes, Marie Antoinette's brother finally gave Louis the talk and they were able to conceive. Brother, stop eyeing my sister in the ass. THX. When I gave my first blowjob I didn't know what coming was or that it was a thing. Eventually I got pretty bored and stopped, so he told me, you're supposed to go until I finish, and I remember thinking that's rude, how am I supposed to know when you're finished? Stick her with the pointy end. I understood how sex happens at 13 years of age when a girl whispered it in my ear. That was also the day I realized that I had a vagina. Needless to say, I was stunned. The first time I saw my boyfriend's penis, at 20, I was again quite surprised. I had never watched PRN and had been expecting something entirely different. So, even though I shied away at first, within 24 hours I was pretty pleased with it. First time sex was very painful. Way more than expected. But second time was good. My boyfriend knew how things happened and I was very open about communicating. Honestly, I have had sex maybe 3 times without orgasm. Close bracket. Oh. And the boyfriend is my husband now. In certain cultures, such as Judaism, there is a husband-wife coach for each spouse from the engagement to the wedding. They discuss proper etiquette for how to treat your way. And part of it is a full sex ed rundown. Somewhat related. But the first girl I started doing stuff with made me wear a condom while giving me a hand job. She made it out to seem to be the normal thing to do, and I guess it made sense because it meant cum didn't go flying everywhere. However, it made things really awkward with the next girl I was with, and I pulled out a condom when she was playing with me. She was like, whoa. I'm not ready to have sex with you yet. And then I explained that I wasn't trying to mean that. She informed me that was a bit weird and it totally killed the mood. I actually was on the other side. My first boyfriend came from a Catholic school without proper sex education. After I had to explain him that a woman can't get pregnant from petting, as long as no sperm is involved, I prepared a basic lecture about sex. I felt like his teacher. The first sex was acceptable but not good. Even with my sex education. Is anyone's first sex ever good? I poked till I found my way in. Not quite the same. But in 6th grade we watched a sex ed film strip. There was a graphic of like a cylinder going into another cylinder. I was horrified and didn't sleep for days. I always thought that sex was the rubbing penis on vulva. Then semen seeped in to get you pregnant. I knew there was a hole. But I didn't think penises went inside. I definitely didn't want that to happen to me. For the next few years anyway. You have to put a seed in the belly of the women. And push it inside with your dick. Instructions unclear, penis stuck in her navel. In Afghan we had a local that wanted us to fix his wife. She wasn't having children. We spoke to him in depth to find out what he meant. It turned out, through our interpreter, that he was a shy boy. He used to be the village sex cushion. So after he grew to adulthood and married, his only version of sexual education was those that had sex with him and lie. So at the age of 21 and through an interpreter I had to tell a almost 30ish Afghan man about the vagina. What is a village sex cushion? My first girlfriend came from a very Christian household and she honestly believed that you got pregnant anyway semen could enter your body. She thought that if she gave me a blowjob that she could get pregnant. I was laughing at first until I realized she was serious, and then I told her everything I was taught in sex ed and we googled a few things just to confirm what I was teaching her. I learned from PRN, to be honest. Hence why I had a few truths to learn when it came to women and what they actually liked. Turns out not everybody likes golf balls being potted into their asshole. We have a friend who is a fertility doctor in Silicon Valley. He treats many highly skilled Indian immigrant couples. In several cases he has had to explain that they don't need a doctor yet. And gives them the most basic of sex ed. Sex is so embarrassing and taboo in some cultures that no one has even explained to them how it works. As an Indian I confirm that sex is very alien concept to everyone here. Like if someone ever heard you talking about sex. Congrats, you're the most disgusting person ever. Even girls of your age are not gonna talk to you. It's like everyone hates sex here. Yet we have 1.3 billion sex haters. My first time was a little awkward. I grew up without internet and was homeschooled by my southern grandparents, so sex wasn't taught at all. I had deduced that the vagina was on the front. Roughly equal to where the penis is on a male. I also had no clue that female nipples were larger than a male's. My first time was with a woman in her 30s and I was 17. She basically had to walk me through every step and had to put up with tons of looking and asking questions. My first time was with a woman in her 30s and I was 17. Huh. Well, my dad tried to have the talk with me. But it was very confusing and I didn't understand it. Then I just sort of figured it out after a while. And once puberty hit I finally began to put it together. A question like this makes you wonder how humans procreated for so long before the advent of internet or even magazines, books to read them up. I imagine spaces were not as segregated as they are now. You didn't have separate bedrooms for most of human history. After houses became a norm, sex was talked about. It's only know that it's a taboo subject, but war and violence are okay for children to see. A few years ago I was working with a young girl who was 21. She came over to me quietly after work one day. We all knew she'd been asked on her first ever date and was very nervous, excited, and said that they had kissed briefly and she was a bit worried she was pregnant now. I asked her if she knew how sex worked and she shook her head and looked like she was about to cry. I waited until everyone else had left, then pulled out a whiteboard and a marker and spent the next hour drawing body parts and explaining the whole process. It was all new to her. She sat with a slight look of horror when I explained the penis. She changed schools in high school and missed the year at each where they do sex ed. And somehow never been curious enough to look things up. They're married with 2 kids now. So I guess she worked it out. My mom homeschooled me and spent years dodging the "how do girls get pregnant" question. Finally pinned her down enough for her to give possibly the world's technically correct answer when I was 12. The man's penis goes into her vagina. I didn't know penises could get erect. I had only ever seen a baby's penis during a diaper change. I didn't know a vagina was a hole. I thought it was the labia. So I thought for a few years that a man slipped his flaccid Penis between her labia like a fine hot dog, and somehow that could get a woman pregnant if she had an egg in her uterus. I didn't have formal sex education and grew up with girls and a very modest father. After puberty, I figured the basic stuff out. I saw PRN when I was 8, so I knew what genitals looked like beforehand. One could say normal penises are smaller, but that wasn't the case for my first anyways. My mom was very through with teaching about the different types of BC and STDs since she was a nurse. I knew more about it than most of my peers who did go to health class, which was kinda funny to me. My boyfriend and I took it slow, so we got fairly comfortable with each other before even having sex. The first time was pretty much like everyone else's. Kinda awkward and not fantastic. Practice makes perfect, right? I did receive sex education and I was given diagrams of male genitalia, but somehow I completely misunderstood testicles. I thought it was an organ that lived up inside the body. When I saw my high school boyfriend naked for the first time, I was dumbfounded. I was like, what the are those ugly ass bits hanging behind your dick? I remember thinking they were pretty unsightly for that entire relationship. Ugh. I wish I could put this on a throwaway account. But oh well. Here goes. I learned stimulation from climbing rope. How? You ask? Well, the knots, where you can grab and wrap your legs around to climb up it, rubbed against my, well, female part in gym class. I was fully clothed. No worries. I remember dry humping rope knots when I was about 8 years old because it felt good. I didn't understand why it was wrong and it was all very innocent. But I even asked my mom for a rope to climb in our backyard. Unbeknownst to her, it was specifically so I could rub my CLT0R $ on the knots when I climbed it. It was taken down very quickly once my mom saw what was happening. I have the feeling a lot of kids, and definitely my gym teacher, that poor lady, had some weird thoughts about me. Hopefully they forgot by now. They taught us about our job. Didn't explain how it was compatible with the job of the other gender. This subreddit is so horny. Traditional Asian family. We're not very expressive at the best of times, so I never received the talk. I kinda just discovered it by myself from classmates and older cousins making lewd jokes. Then came sex ed in 7th grade, I guess. Really, it is instinct. People have figured it out on their own since the beginning of time. My best friend ripped a chicken nugget apart, then repeatedly shoved the one with more meat into the one that had just the shell. My dad is a reproductive endocrinologist gynecologist, does IVF test tube baby stuff for a living. Dinner time convo often resolved around sperm, eggs, conception, embryos. So I knew about gametes and fertilization but not sex. I remember I thought the sperm crawled out like caterpillars and crept across the bed at night to fertilize the eggs. Eventually I asked the how question and my dad explained it. Was terrifying to me at the time. Also later he taught sex ed at my school. That was awkward. My husband and I grew up Mormon, educated families. We knew from common knowledge what goes where, but everything else we didn't know. And didn't know we didn't know. Even small stuff you never think about, like you have to actually spread your legs. Not just something you hear in movies. We had so much discouragement on our honeymoon, me crying and screaming. Teenagers do this. How can we not figure it out? And our entire first year of marriage. And then so much shame about not going at it like rabbits like we thought we should be doing. Sex life in general improved drastically when we left the church together 5 years ago. I have a much older brother and I found his PRN stash before I even hit 10. Caught him with his girlfriend. And the poor guy had to answer some awkward questions, i.e. then you converse with your friends. Some of which whom are girls, and then it just snowballs from there. Learned all that before I hit puberty. And that's when the practicum starts. All very natural actually. Was a 25-year virgin. The first thing this girl asked me was if I was a virgin. She engaged the SX. I went to Wine Town and I ate PSS while like I had 3 tongues. Lasted like 20 minutes going as hard as I could. It was just instinct. Once I got rhythm down after a minute it was smooth sailing from there. I didn't overthink it so it wasn't awkward for either of us. I just did it. And we've been together for 3 years almost. I got lucky to find someone who came onto me and happened to be a chick I really ended up liking. At first we tried the ear canal because I'd often heard people say, "My headline hurts. Once you go black, you go deaf." P-Run-Hub. I remember in 8th grade me and my Mormon best friend were sitting down on the trampoline and the topic of girls came up. I had an older brother so I knew how SX worked and watched PRN from probably too young of an age so I just kinda figured it was common knowledge. Anyway we were sitting there and I said something along the lines of blah blah. Have SX. Blah blah and my friend just says wait what? Full stop. I said you know they had SX. Wait dude how do you think babies are made? And my best friend said you know the mom and the dad kiss and then she gets pregnant. I was like no wait am I about to give my best the talk? Boy you are in for a surprise. And now he knows. We are both 20 now and still best friends. Edit. I grew up Mormon and attended Brigham Young University in Utah. I knew this girl who was engaged. And she confided in me she was afraid to see her fiance's penis for the first time. After they got married. She told me she was shocked that it didn't look like a dog's penis. She thought her husband's penis was gonna be a red rocket. PRN. PRN taught me a lot. My first time went really well. The only thing I didn't understand when going down on her was I was supposed to lick the clit and not stick my whole tongue in. She kindly told what I was supposed to do haha so it went well. It's not like sticking the tongue is forbidden. I've been exposed to PRN since I was like 8. I think in my pre-teens I had a good idea of what was involved. Lost my V card at 24. It was pretty natural and wasn't awkward at all. I went to a conservative religious school. Our teacher told us stories about when he was a marriage counselor for newly married couples. A lot of them knew nothing about SX. There was one couple in particular that were trying to conceive a child. They just took their clothes off and just laid there in bed. They said they did it 4 weeks and she still wasn't pregnant. Shocking I know. So basically there was a couple on this planet who lied there nude, praying that God would make that woman pregnant. The counselor ended up having to explicitly explain how babies were made and what they needed to do to make children. Some kid at camp was singing put the lime in the coconut and shake it all around and it all came together for me. I was 12. This guy received SZUL revelation at the age of 12 from listening to a tropical cocktail recipe. You know, when you grab a woman's breast and you feel it and it feels like a bag of sand when you're touching it. I found out by being assaulted and arped a few times. My school didn't talk about any of this stuff so I never spoke up to teachers or understood it was wrong. We need better SX education in Louisiana. I've read somewhere. An Asian couple tried for years to have a baby but they kept failing cause they've been doing it wrong. They always had an L instead of vaginal. My mom worked in a clinic which taught SX education and birth control during the 1980s. They had a couple come in who were from a country where you didn't talk about SX. Ever. They were trying to get pregnant and couldn't but failed to understand why. In the doctor's office there was bruising around the belly button of the water woman and the doctor asked what it was from. It was stated it's from trying to conceive. It was asked, step by step, how they thought you made a baby. The man was trying to put his penis into the belly button which lead to the bruising. No kidding. Figuratively and literally, instructions were given to the couple and they were never heard from again. I have to imagine that reproduction is one of the most base instincts all living things possess and that even without any education your body would basically manage on its own without too much higher reasoning needed. Yeah. That's what I believe. D. 2. But every now and then I'd stumble upon a story in which people tried getting pregnant for years only to find out they were doing it wrong. So I figured I'd ask. But seems like it worked out well for most people here.